This video was proudly sponsored by Surfshark. How's it going, everybody? Too spooky here. A while back, I made a video explaining the Millennium items from Yu-Gi-Oh! And in that video, we covered the vast majority of the Egyptian lore and dark history that surrounded them. Now today, I felt we should revisit that topic with the spiritual successor to the Millennium items, the Shadow Charms, along with tackling conjoining topics like the Shadow Riders and the mysterious history surrounding them, which, in all honesty, involves a lot more questions than answers. When it comes to Yugioh GX, the Shadow Riders were introduced as the main antagonists of the first season, also bringing along the first overarching storyline for the series. With the Shadow Riders came the mysterious Shadow Charms, which are 8 different mysterious objects that heavily mirror the Millennium items. While they may be very similar to the Millennium items, their history is almost non-existent in comparison, and is never explored throughout the series. It's never been outright stated why they weren't further explored, but if I were to take an educated guess, their introduction was just a failed attempt to capitalize on the familiarity and popularity of the Millennium items from the original Yu-Gi-Oh! If you weren't already aware, the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime was adapted from the manga written by Kazuki Takahashi, and throughout the manga, he explored the entire history of the Millennium items' conception in ancient Egypt, also giving us an in-depth look at the mystical powers they possessed as a result. After finishing the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, Takahashi took a step back from writing Yu-Gi-Oh! Altogether, and instead took on a supervising role for the future of the series, mainly only offering character and monster designs for future iterations of Yu-Gi-Oh! While others did the rest. So when GX came around, it not only began as anime only, but Takahashi had little to no involvement with the story taking place, nor did he write the subsequent GX manga to follow. So when it comes to why these Shadow Charms were introduced in GX, it's likely because whoever was in charge of the story wanted to sprinkle in some of that Egyptian lore and therefore shadow games to the new series, without exploring it at all. Therefore, we got knockoff Millennium items in the form of Shadow Charms, knockoff Egyptian god cards in the form of the Sacred Beasts, and the disappointing group that was the Shadow Riders. To actually begin diving into this topic, I suppose we should start with the Sacred Beasts themselves, as the entire conception of the Shadow Riders revolves around obtaining these 3 cards. As far as the lore presented goes, the Sacred Beasts are 3 monster cards that apparently have the power to rule the world. They were sealed underneath Duel Academy by Kagemaru, as in the past he attempted to harness their power and failed. Therefore, he sealed them under something called the Spirit Gates, which were held shut by 7 keys, called the Spirit Keys. These keys were noted to be the only method of opening the Spirit Gate, and therefore the only way to awaken the Sacred Beasts. Another little stipulation would be that these Spirit Keys could only be obtained by winning a duel. So basically, if you wanted to acquire the 7 keys and open the Spirit Gate, you had to win each individual key from subsequent duels, meaning it's not possible to open the gates by simply stealing the keys, as the Dark Scorpions attempted to do. Though, all of this was later revealed to be completely meaningless, as it turns out the Spirit Gate couldn't actually be opened by these keys. No, that was all a ruse. Instead, the Spirit Gate could only be opened by dueling spirit, which Kagemaru didn't have before. And the reason he built Duel Academy on this island above the Spirit Gate was because he believed that if a bunch of top-class duelists were constantly dueling on the island, eventually someone would have the necessary dueling spirit to not only open the Spirit Gate, but also control the Sacred Beasts. And in this case, it's insinuated to be Jaden. Once Kagemaru obtains the Sacred Beasts and begins summoning them, the Sacred Beasts start absorbing the spirit and pictures of every single card in existence, which somehow grants Kagemaru a younger body, which getting a younger body was his goal to obtain with the Sacred Beasts to begin with. Additionally, with his Shadow Charm, he's locked in a shadow game with Jaden. The goal of said shadow game is that he wants to absorb Jaden's soul, as apparently his spirit is the only spirit that has the ability to withstand this card destruction ability, meaning with Jaden's soul, Kagemaru could fully harness the Sacred Beast's power and take over the world. Saying it out loud makes it sound pretty fucking stupid, to be honest. Jaden eventually wins the duel, Kagemaru goes back to being an old man, all the cards in the world go back to normal, and the Sacred Beasts are resealed. And that is that. The sacred beasts themselves come back into play during Season 3 of the series. However, the Shadow Charms aren't a part of Season 3, and since that's our main topic, we're going to leave it at that. Although, before we officially move on, there's this huge chunk of lore missing that I quickly need to touch upon. So we know that Kagemaru somehow came across these sacred beast cards and sealed them on this island, right? Well, throughout the various encounters with the abandoned dorm room on the island, we see what appears to be Egyptian writing and stone slabs on the walls depicting the sacred beasts, among other things, perhaps indicating that the sacred beast cards originated on this island. The problem with this being that this island isn't Egypt. In fact, its only connection with Egypt being that it's in bumfuck Egypt, aka the middle of the f***ing ocean. So, they're trying to insinuate that this abandoned dorm room has some sort of connection to the history of duel monsters that occurred in ancient Egypt, which apparently surrounds the sacred beasts. Okay, sure, whatever. The possible reason for this, although never truly explained, is perhaps because Amnail brought these Egyptian slabs to the abandoned dorm room from Egypt to study them or to find a way to lift the curse on his body, or maybe it was Kagemaru after the fact. We really don't know. Taking that at face value is fine, but it opens up another huge plot hole. When it comes to duel monsters in general, we simply wouldn't have duel monsters without Pegasus coming across what duel monsters used to be in ancient Egypt, and deciding to make it into a card game himself based on the monsters he saw on those stone slabs. Some of the most prominent examples being the Egyptian god cards. At no point were the Egyptian god cards said to be able to take over the world, although it has been said that whomever is able to harness the power of the Egyptian gods could be considered the king of games, which ended up being Yugi as we know. Or, if used for malicious purposes, they could be used to cause a great deal of harm and death to others. So by that logic, the Egyptian god cards seem to be a little bit lackluster compared to the world-conquering sacred beasts over here. But that aside, the main point I'm trying to make here would be the fact that Pegasus had to create the Egyptian god cards himself with the power of the Millennium Eye protecting him, as everyone else who attempted to work on them originally were attacked by the spirits of the Egyptian gods in the process. And after Pegasus successfully created them, he had Ishizu seal them away in the pharaoh's tomb, as he was being harmed by the Egyptian gods in his sleep and feared using them any further. So since Pegasus and his company is the one who created and continues to create the cards within the anime, by that logic, at some point Pegasus himself must have created the sacred beast cards. Otherwise, this kind of implies that basically anyone can just create cards all willy-nilly these days if Pegasus wasn't the one who created the sacred beast cards. Just something I felt I needed to mention because it honestly doesn't make any sense. Or, if my logic is actually correct, it just feels like this huge plot point was never brought to light. Now, before we move on to the Shadow Riders, let's quickly talk about today's sponsor, Surfshark. In this day and age with so many ways to have your data tracked, your IP exposed, or even just your favorite anime blocked in your country,
I hate this channel.
a VPN is crucial to surf the web safely and effectively. And when it comes to VPNs, there are none better than Surfshark. It not only brings you the top services you can expect from a VPN, like encrypting and protecting your network and data with numerous potential locations, including 2 different encryptions at the same time, but it also has other features like protection from viruses and malware before they even have a chance to reach your device. Additionally, Surfshark is the only VPN that allows connection to unlimited devices simultaneously, to protect you no matter what device you're using, among many other helpful features. The best part being that it is extremely affordable. By following the link in the description and using code 2SPOOKY, you can get 2 years of protection for as little as $177 a month, with 3 months for free. So don't get stuck in the shadow realm of the World Wide Web. Sign up for Surfshark today. Next up, we need to talk about the Shadow Riders, which is the name of the group that Kagemaru created on his quest to obtain the power of the sacred beasts. This group is made up of 7 individuals, and then of course Kagemaru as their leader. An interesting thing to note would be that only 6 individuals were shown when the Shadow Riders were first introduced. Each member of the Shadow Riders have their very own Shadow Charm given to them by Kagemaru, each of which have their own separate abilities that we will touch upon in a little bit. Kagemaru recruited each member of the Shadow Shadow Riders to help him achieve his goal, though only a handful of them actually have their own intentions as to why they chose to join the group. Their overall purpose was to obtain the spirit keys by dueling those who held them, but as we later learned, this was merely a test to get those who held the keys to bring out their dueling spirit and unlock the spirit gate. First up, we have Night Shroud, which is a topic for its own video in actuality. But to briefly summarize, Night Shroud is this dark spirit from the world of darkness, which is this opposite dimension, somewhere between the normal dimension and the one where dual spirits lie. Night Shroud was summoned during a ritual that took place at the abandoned dorm. Yusuke Fujiwara was the one who performed the ritual, with Atticus Rhodes following him and witnessing the event. Yusuke gave Atticus Night Shroud's mask before disappearing, and Atticus would eventually fall under its influence, leading to him defeating the Gravekeeper's chief for half of the Shadow Charm Pendant, and eventually being recruited by Kagemaru to the Shadow Riders, after being led to them by Amnel. Night Shroud would later become the main antagonist of the final season of GX, but in regards to his role during the first season as a Shadow Rider, apparently he chose to join up with the Shadow Riders because he wanted to use the Sacred Beast's power for something, though what exactly he wanted to do with their power was never mentioned. After losing in his Shadow game with Jaden, Night Shroud was sealed away within a card, giving Atticus control of his mind and body once again, as apparently Night Shroud needs a host body to act outside the world of darkness. The second Shadow Rider was Camula, who is a f***ing vampire, and apparently the last of her kind, as the rest of the vampires were massacred centuries prior. Kagemaru came across Camula's coffin that she was hiding in, and invited her to join the Shadow Riders with the promise that for every soul she captures with her Shadow Charm choker, she'll eventually be able to resurrect her vampire race with the help of the Sacred Beast's power. And with her new vampire army, she plans to take revenge on the human race for eradicating hers, giving her an actual legitimate motivation to try and help Kagemaru. Because she's a vampire, she can apparently control a bunch of bats to be her eyes and ears. Her shadow games involved stealing souls and placing them in dolls. Additionally, she had a special card called Illusion Gate, which required her to give a soul to the sacred beasts in return for using it. Though, if she won the duel, the soul was not taken. The wagered soul in question could literally be anyone within the room, rather than just her own. Though, if up against another Shadow Charm, specifically the Shadow Charm Pendant, it blocks out her ability to steal other souls, forcing her to wager her own, which resulted in Camula losing her soul at the hands of Jaden, therefore causing her body to turn to dust and the last vampire on the planet to disappear. The third Shadow Rider was Tanya, who is actually a f***ing tiger. Her purpose for joining the Shadow Riders is completely unknown, as she doesn't even seem to be pursuing the spirit keys, and instead is just trying to find a suitable mate, whose dueling skills need to be top tier. The fourth Shadow Rider was Don Zalug, who is actually a f***ing dual spirit, and also the leader of the Dark Scorpions. His purpose for joining the Shadow Riders is also unknown, and considering that his method for obtaining the spirit keys involved simply stealing them rather than dueling, and dual spirits got sucked up by the sacred beast's power, he was likely out of the loop when it came to Kagemaru's true goal. Don Zalug, along with the rest of the Dark Scorpions, were defeated by Chaz, where they transformed back into cards, and joined Chaz with his other dual spirits. Though after this, the Dark Scorpions are never mentioned again. The fifth Shadow Rider was Abydos III, who is a f***ing pharaoh from ancient Egypt, likely coming sometime after Pharaoh Atem, which means the two could possibly be related. An interesting thing to note about Abydos in particular would be that it's possible he had his Shadow Charm from ancient times, as once he is awakened, he already has it upon his head, and at no point do we find out if Kagemaru found his tomb and gave it to him in the past or anything like that. Although, once Abydos is awakened within the afterlife, he instructs his men to prepare his chariot, which we find out is apparently this magical flying hunk of Egyptian metal that can travel from the afterlife to the present time, or something. It really doesn't make any sense. It's unknown why Abydos joined the Shadow Riders as well. In the past, he was apparently undefeated in the Egyptian version of Duel Monsters, which he learns in his duel with Jaden was because his servants just let him win every time, and in reality, he actually big suck. After losing to Jaden, he states that he wishes to duel Jaden again in 100 years, and leaves on his flying Egyptian yacht back into the afterlife, or back through time. Not really sure which. You know, something I just realized also doesn't really make any sense. So Abydos played the Egyptian version of Duel Monsters back in the day, right? Which means he used those slabs and everything like that. So at what point did he get the actual Duel Monster cards? Like, did this man just pull up to a card shop on his yacht and say, "Hey, give me everything you got," and then went to fight Jaden? Like, what the hell? An additional ability Abydos apparently possesses is the ability to just have mummies randomly break through the ground. So that's cool. The sixth Shadow Rider was Titan, who is a con artist turned Shadow Realm food turned Shadow Rider. In his first appearance, he was hired by Crowler to take on Jaden, which to lure Jaden to the abandoned dorm to duel him, he kidnapped Alexis and created a fake shadow game with a fake Millennium puzzle. Jaden eventually discovered it was indeed fake after all, by chucking a card straight through the fake Millennium puzzle with masterful precision. Titan attempted to escape, but was forced to continue the duel after being possessed by the shadows, which led to an actual shadow game, and the first one present in GX. That shadow game resulted in Titan losing to Jaden and drugged to the Shadow Realm. While within the Shadow Realm, Titan was apparently saved by Kagemaru under the condition that he become a Shadow Rider, which obviously he'd accept if it means he can get out of the fucking Shadow Realm. He later duels Alexis for her spirit key, and upon losing, he is sucked back into the Shadow Realm after all. The seventh and final Shadow Rider was Amnail, otherwise known as Linman Banner. Amnail was an alchemist in pursuit of creating a Philosopher's Stone, along with pursuing rare Duel Monster cards. This pursuit eventually led him to accidentally discover the Sacred Beast stone slabs a few years after Pegasus discovered Duel Monsters in Egypt. And because he discovered them, he was cursed with an illness for intruding upon them. This goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about who could have possibly created the Sacred Beast cards, as it's likely Amnail first discovered the Sacred Beasts, but he would still need to relay this information to Pegasus to actually create the cards. Yo, Pegasus, I found this weird tomb with these sacred beasts, which are apparently way cooler and edgier and more powerful than the Egyptian gods. You should go check it out. Ah, stronger than the Egyptian gods, you say? I must make cards of them right away. Thanks, Amnail boy. Anyhow, after being struck with that curse or illness, he created a homunculus body to prolong his life. However, after a while, it began to fail. So he opted to join the Shadow Riders, so he could harness the Sacred Beast's power to not only restore his body, but also so he could create a Philosopher's Stone and become immortal. Amnail was responsible for getting this whole quest moving, as he sent Jaden to be tested by the Gravekeepers on purpose, and was also the one who originally led Atticus to the abandoned dorm. Much later on, he disappears, and eventually reveals himself as the final Shadow Rider, taking out Alexis and Chaz before losing a shadow game to Jaden, resulting in the death of his body, and his spirit living within his cat Pharaoh from then onward. Upon his death, he also mentions that his true purpose for becoming a Shadow Rider was to make Jaden a better duelist, so that he alone could stop Kagemaru from awakening the Sacred Beast's power. So which motivation was actually the truth, we'll never know. Finally, we have the Shadow Charms, one for each Shadow Rider, and of course Kagemaru, for a total of 8. Those being the Shadow Charm Pendant, Choker, Gauntlet, Eye Patch, Headband, Mask, Tablet, and Ring. The origin of these Shadow Charms are completely unknown, other than the fact that Kagemaru somehow obtained them all, and gave one to each member of the Shadow Riders. When it came to the Millennium items, their conception was thanks to the whole Zork fiasco, and to actually create the items with Shadow Alchemy, it required 99 human sacrifices. Knowing that information, we can, at the very least, assume that some sort of Shadow Alchemy took place to create these Shadow Charms, and although their power appears to be less than that of the Millennium items, they still have otherworldly powers nonetheless. The one power they all share, to our knowledge, is the ability to initiate shadow games, and also cancel each other out to some extent. After defeating all of the Shadow Riders, the students collected all of the Shadow Charms, and although some elements from the Shadow Riders like Night Shroud appear later in GX, the Shadow Charms are never mentioned again after Kagemaru's defeat. When it comes to their individual abilities, they mostly fit specific needs to each individual user, and while some were capable of much more than others, we're still going to take a look at each one nonetheless. First, we have the Shadow Charm Pendant, which began in 2 separate pieces worn by Night Shroud and Jaden Yuki, before Jaden received both pieces to fully complete the pendant. From what we saw, even in 2 separate pieces, the Shadow Charm was still capable of using its power. The pieces of the pendant were given to Nightshroud and Jaden from the Gravekeeper's Chief, as they were the only 2 duelists capable of beating him. As far as its individual abilities go, the Shadow Charm Pendant was shown able to teleport people, seal souls inside a card from the result of a Shadow game, very similar to Pegasus's Millennium Eye, along with trapping people inside a spherical energy barrier. Additionally, it also has the ability to glow when shady shit is going down. Next up, we have the Shadow Charm Choker, which was used by Camula. Due to its inherent nature as a choker, it's also implied that this particular Shadow Charm requires daddy issues. The only 2 unique abilities this choker possessed was the ability to place souls inside dolls from the result of a Shadow game, and also wager souls during a Shadow game by using her special card Illusion Gate. Thirdly, we have the Shadow Charm Gauntlet, which was used by Tanya. The main ability of the gauntlet is allowing Tanya to take on a human form, when in reality she's actually a tiger. The gauntlet also allowed her to perform a soul match, with the use of her card Amazonas Arena, which is basically where you practice domestic abuse with your soul to lower each other's life points. Then we have the Shadow Charm Eye Patch, which was used by Don Zalug. The only real ability demonstrated with this eye patch was allowing a dual spirit to take on a human form, along with allowing other dual spirits to do the same. Next up, we have the Shadow Charm Headband, which was used by Abydos III. This one is a bit up for interpretation, as it apparently has the ability to allow souls to leave the afterlife and take on a physical human form, possibly resurrect dead mummies wherever the user chooses, and perhaps even allow a gigantic golden Egyptian boat thing to float. If not outright because of the headband, then there are some serious shenanigans happening here. After that, we have the Shadow Charm Mask, which was used by Titan. Conveniently, this Shadow Charm looks exactly like the mask Titan was previously wearing, except with one of those eyes slapped on there. The mask is also the edgiest of the Shadow Charms, as it allows Titan to essentially rule over darkness and control it, which includes being able to open portals, perform hypnosis, talk to people telepathically, and create a dark arena where their opponent cannot see. Additionally, it makes him look really veiny. Next up, we have the Shadow Charm Tablet, or Shadow Charm Emerald Tablet, which was used by Amnel. This tablet had a variety of different abilities, such as creating these green circular shapes called the Mark of Amnel, that can teleport others and also make a pathway to lead others. And it also had another ability that can consume others into a pocket dimension outside of Earth. Additionally, the tablet resembles the Millennium Spellbook in a lot of ways, and given that Amnel was an alchemist, and the Millennium Spellbook contained spells for using shadow alchemy, there may be some connection between the 2. Finally, we have the Shadow Charm Ring, which was used by Kagemaru. This Shadow Charm has a number of different abilities compared to the rest. First off, it was shown to have the ability to harness the sacred beasts and their power, to grant Kagemaru a strong and youthful body by absorbing dual spirits. It can also absorb human souls into another, which Kagemaru planned to do to Jaden. Additionally, it allowed Kagemaru to perform a number of other tasks, such as possibly entering the afterlife to recruit Abydos, entering the Shadow Realm to retrieve Titan, locating Camula's coffin, you name it, therefore likely making it the most powerful of the Shadow Charms. In general, I think these Shadow Charms had a lot of potential, but unfortunately with what appeared to be poor planning and an overall lack of depth, we were only given a small glimpse of what these mystical items had entail. But with that, we've officially explained the Shadow Charms, the Shadow Riders, and their history with the sacred beasts. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you learned something new or gained a better understanding of how the lore in Yu-Gi-Oh works. If you did, make sure to attack that like button directly. While you're at it, be sure to subscribe with those notifications on so you don't miss the next Yu-Gi-Oh related video. And be sure to comment which topic you'd like me to cover next. Before we go, I just wanted to let you guys know that I've got 2 new projects in the works, in addition to the content I'm making on this channel. The first being a second channel, where I'm going to be trying to upload content a little more regularly with an editor. That way, while I'm working on big projects for this channel, you'll have something else to watch from me in the meantime. And secondly, I've recently started a podcast with a friend called American Sushi, where we'll be talking about a range of different topics every other week. Links to both of those channels will be found in the description, and I thank you in advance for checking them out. Once again, thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring the video. Follow the link below and use code 2SPOOKY to get your 2-year protection for as little as $177 a month, with 3 months for free. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon with the next video. Oh fuck, wait a second. How could I forget about the Shadow Charm private jet?
You lied to me, said goodbye to me, and I said